It has a lot to say about unity and about serving God. So if you have scripture or if you have a phone that you can look it up, Nehemiah 2:17 through 18. New Living Translation is what I'm using. Nehemiah 17 through 18. But Nehemiah said to them, "You know very well what trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been destroyed with fire. Let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and end this disgrace." And then I told them about how the gracious Lord of God had been on me and about my conversation with the king. And they replied at once, "Yes, let's rebuild the wall," just like a football cheer. "Yes, let's rebuild the wall." And so they began this good work. So this chapter kind of gives us three things to remember. First, to serve God realistically, and Josie addressed that very well this morning in her vision. We have to be realistic about things. We need to learn to wait on him. Not easy to do, is it? To work with people and to wrestle with problems wisely. Things don't always go smoothly. Even when you've prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, sometimes it doesn't come out the way you think it's going to happen. Following Jesus does not guarantee a trouble-free life. Ouch, yeah. But I have learned that sometimes when I'm following Jesus, sometimes things get a little murkier than they were before. But part of maturity is learning how to deal with those troubles and to work through them. And it also establishes your faith in God so much stronger, as the gentleman mentioned this morning when he was giving his testimony about faith in God. So waiting on God, working with people of all sorts, and wrestling wisely, that's hard to say, wrestling wisely with a steady stream of problems are essential to finishing the course that God has set before us. So to serve God, we first need to wait on him. So this chapter refers to the fact that it took 4 months before Nehemiah went to the king to ask to him to help about Jerusalem. During that time, Nehemiah was burdened with the news that he wept and he mourned and he fasted and he prayed and he wept and he mourned and he fasted and he prayed for God to just do something about this grievous situation in Jerusalem. Has that ever happened to you? You prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and you think, "God, where are you?" And then he shows up in a surprising way. But compared to other people in the Bible, God used Nehemiah's 4-month effectively, but others had to wait longer. Abraham waited 25 years before God gave him Isaac. Joseph spent much time in Potiphar's slavery and then another 2 years in prison before he was raised up to be the second in command as Pharaoh. Israel was enslaved for 400 years in Egypt, as we've all been studying as we've been studying the Bible chronologically. And then Moses spent 40 years in the desert, and then another 40 years wandering around the wilderness. David spent his entire 20-year-old existence when he was in his 20s running from King Saul, even though he knew he was already to be the king. The Apostle Paul spent 3 years in Arabia, and then more years of obscurity in Tarsus before the Lord began to use him in a more significant manner. So those whom God uses must learn to wait on him. Ugh, that's hard, isn't it? Waiting is hard. It's like waiting for a baby. They come eventually, but sometimes you think, "Oh, are they ever going to get here?" But while Nehemiah was waiting, he did something very effective. He prayed. He prayed over and over and over again those 4 months. He was burdened, and he waited for God to show him what to do. In fact, in the 13 chapters of Nehemiah, there are 11 prayers registered there. And many of these are just sentence prayers. Have you ever prayed a sentence prayer? Like, "Oh, God, help me right now." Some of those are like that. Some of the Nehemiah prayers are like that. But he was always looking to God. So then while he was waiting, he developed patience. Now, patience is a virtue that many of us have to work on to keep going. But God reveals it to us someday. It's the patience is the fruit of the Spirit that God wants to develop in all of us. But Nehemiah didn't hear about what had happened in Jerusalem, and then he immediately went to the king and said, I need a year's leave of absence. I need to go and fix Jerusalem, and blabbered that all off to the king. No, he waited 4 months. He waited till he had a plan in place. And then, after that 4 months, the king noticed that he was grieving. And then God brought it to the king's awareness, and then Nehemiah could then tell him the story about what was happening. His patience also was seen when he arrived at Jerusalem. He could have ridden into town with all his soldiers that he brought from the other country and said, we're here to fix you. Now, that doesn't always work, does it? No. He waited for 3 days. He scoped out the situation. And then he came up with a plan on how he was going to get the people to help him work through the situation. And as Josie was saying again, that it takes everybody working together to make these things happen. They don't just happen overnight like a miracle. And so while he was waiting, though, he came up with his plan. This chapter shows that Nehemiah was doing a lot of advanced thinking and planning. He said to the king, when the king says, well, how much time do you need? Nehemiah could have said, oh, well, I just prayed, and I'll just wait and see what God has in plan. Well, sometimes we want to think that, and sometimes that does work. But really, he came up with this plan of how he was going to do this, and this, and this, and this, and that was how the wall was going to be rebuilt. And he was there actually 12 years. He stayed for a few years to build the wall, and then he went home to give his report to the king, and then he came back as governor. So he had that time. And so while he waited on the Lord, he prayed, he planned, he developed patience, and then he learned to work with other people. He knew that he had an unbelieving king that said, I don't believe in your God. But yet he was able to work with this king, and the resources that the king brought to the table helped them develop the plan to rebuild the wall. And he also learned that he had to work with demoralized believers. Here were these people that had been in Jerusalem. They'd been trying to rebuild their wall. It wasn't like they didn't care, but they needed somebody to say, here's the plan. But he had to give them hope. They knew it in their head that God was in control, but he needed to be the hands and feet to show that God was in control. And then he had to deal with his enemies. All the villages or towns around Jerusalem, they had all these little kings there, and they didn't want Jerusalem to succeed because that was going to be a power that was going to threaten them. And so Nehemiah had to learn how to work with these enemies so that God's plan could move forward. So to serve God realistically, we must learn then to wrestle with the problems that come before us. And problems in church buildings are very well known to us. Our building is 20 years old, and things are happening, and we just have to fix them. And the people in Uganda have the same issues. They have buildings that crumble, or buildings that have something fall off, or they have roofs that blow away in the wind. They have that a lot. But we have to learn how to wisely deal with those problems and use our resources and pull people together to bring it together for Christ. So Nehemiah knew that he didn't need to gloss over the situation and say, oh, everything's going to be okay. He said, no, but with God's help, we can work through all of this. So to serve God realistically, we must wait on him for his timing, work with all different kinds of people, wrestle with the problems, and come up with solutions led by God's power. And just because it's the Lord's work, we know that it's not going to come by smoothly and effortlessly, but God will give us the strength we need to do it. We need to both be ideal, we need the idealism of that Christ working through us and the realism that what we need to do to make this happen. I hope you know the joy of serving Him in spite of difficulties that come your way. And I hope you will see how God was working in our lives as we endeavored to reach the people of Uganda in a manner similar to the way Nehemiah helped the people rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And together, we can restore the walls of our Jerusalem here. And we're going to unfold a story to you right now that's going to tell you the great things that happened when we went there in 2020, just this year, in April of this year. So this first slide that you've been looking at, it's us at the equator. And this is our group. And each person that's going to speak today will introduce themselves. But today this team is from the one person on the left is Fran. She's an Ohioan that we let travel with us. She's a fun gal. And she's always got a song in her heart. But she came from the East Canton Church. And so she came with us. And then myself, and then Pastor Bill and Nikki Sutter are the two newbies. So we were taking them on the trip. So they got to go on their first safari. And how many people here have been on a safari? One, two, just two? Okay. Oh, Lori, there you are, Lori. Yes. I thought there was more than that. Yes, we've been on safari, and so they went on. So they got to see their first safari, and then Cindy Wodrowski, Jen Coleman, who is here, and then Deb Yates, who is at our Beaverton campus. Next slide shows the challenges we had. Was first we had 20 bins, and if you've ever gone to Uganda, you know you only get three bins each, or 3 suitcases each. But these were important bins. This is an object that we had to conquer. Okay. We had costumes and supplies and things we had planned to show the people and for lessons that we're going to teach. Plus, we brought gifts for Tim and Colleen from the Christian Women's Connection office in Anderson, Indiana. But with God's help, we got all the bins there, and we got them on the plane, and we didn't have to pay a whole lot of money extra. That's always good. Our first adventure we went to the next slide. We'll show you the mountains in western Uganda, and we visited the people in the Rukungiri district. I was fortunate enough to spend all day Saturday with these lovely women from that district. We sang a lot of songs. I taught them Yes, Jesus Loves Me in sign language, and then they taught me a song as well. Then we spent the day and afternoon with 3 different women who were at the cross with Jesus. Each was a different woman and had different situations, but they all were loved by God, and we learned together that God provides for us when we are in need. The next slide shows you, Sunday we were honored to be with Pastor Robert, who is right up there in the left, and his family, and Reverend Justice, who is the district overseer. Both of these men were graduates from our core discipleship group we taught in 2023. We had given the church money for a new roof. Their task was to build the building for the roof. The first picture you see is what we saw on Sunday. And the second picture then is 6 weeks later. I'd say they were motivated. What do you think? This congregation put their trust in God, and they could finish the church. We are still receiving updates from Pastor Robert and Reverend Justice about how God is continuing to provide for them. The next slide then shows you cohort 2 and cohort 3. They truly demonstrated faith in God. Some of them traveled all night by bus to be at Matungo for their classes. Now, these aren't just like streamlined buses that carry 32 people. These are minivans that are crowded, and they have chickens and all kinds of stuff inside them as well. So it's not an easy task, but they did it because they want to learn. Some of them are pastoring churches already. Some are youth leaders. Some are TAP counselors. But all of them want to learn about God and how to tell others about Him. These leaders are receiving the same training that is used here in the United States for new pastors. It's called Leadership Focus here in the United States and Canada, and there we call it core discipleship. Cohort 2 will be graduating in January, and Jen and I are going to get to go to see that graduation. So we are excited to have that group of young people graduate. The next slide shows you the Capona after school program for children whose parents are involved in the TAP program. TAP is a program that provides help for those individuals who are affected by or infected with the AIDS HIV pandemic. The door at the Capona Center was damaged when it was hit by a vehicle. And with the profit from our small TAP operation here in Michigan, of which Leslie is a part of, any money we make from that TAP, we send it on to Africa to use. And we were able to replace the wall, or replace the door, and put up a new fence. And it is standing guard today to continue to protect these children in that TAP office. The next slide, I cannot leave my presentation without talking about Naomi. When we first met Naomi last year, she was working with her mom and dad at a stone quarry. They purchased large stones, and then they would take them and break them up with hammers and make them small, and then sell them back to the stone quarry. And that's how they earned money for their family. We were able to provide money for her so that she could go back to school. And she's at the Hope Vocational Training Center in Matungo, where she's learning tailoring. And when she goes home, she will change her community. Oh, and did I mention, she has a great voice, so I love hearing her sing. Now, Cindy's going to tell you about why we have these outfits on.
So that project that she's holding there was my idea. Way too much. I mean, it was supposed to look, how we love, Michigan loves Africa. And, but we had too many kids to actually sit and show them what to do. But, so before we left Michigan, Colleen had, I think, called Julie maybe and said that we have a great opportunity for you this year. They had been invited to a traditional wedding, and it was a double wedding. And then they were also, it was two brothers and a sister that the parents were giving away to the groom. Is that how you would say it? So we thought, Colleen never asked us to do anything, so we should probably do this wedding. So Colleen had all these fancy dresses, the traditional type wedding dresses, which none of us had. So there's a seamstress there named Grace that came and took our measurements and stuff and made us our traditional wedding outfits. So this was a picture of the group that attended the wedding, and we drove 4 to 5 hours to get there, and then it was 4 to 5 hours to get home back to Tim and Colleen's. And it was long and hot, and our dresses were very hot. But we had a very good time. I did anyway. I enjoyed it. Some were not liking it so well, but because there was a lot of introductions at the wedding. But you can go to the next slide. And if you see, here's the two brides and grooms, and the bride is not supposed to, like here, the bride is happy and smiley and, can hardly wait to be married. And there, you're wondering if they even want to get married because the bride is not supposed to smile at all or even look at her groom. So this was during the reception. This was when they were going to cut the cake, and we're going to, feed it to one another. And this bride in the front, I caught just a glimpse when she looked at her husband to feed him his cake, just a little bit of a smile. And then it was right back to where no smiling. And that's how they had their veils over their face the whole time during the reception, other than um, the eating of the cake. And I missed something too. The reason that Tim and Colleen were invited is because the treasurer of the Church of God in Eastern Africa invited them. And he is devoted to the Church of God and wants the people in his area to hear about Jesus. So he was the guy in the tuck of the last picture. Sorry about that. But anyway, so the next slide. Oh, we were given a cake. They had, I don't know, I think 10 or 12 individual cakes that they gave to people that came as a gift. So when Julie and Ted and I, my husband and I, went in October of last year for their 40th anniversary of the Church of God in Uganda. And so there were different churches. There was some from Ohio and some Germany. There was some from Germany. Well, this couple, Ralph and Michaela Kleiner, were from Germany. And we were blessed to meet them and spend some time with them. And then when we got there in April, they were there again. They had come because they were building a winter home in Jinja, right? Huh? Okay. So I'm sure it's done now because I think they have been living there. So they're Germans, and it's very important to us, for my husband and I, or all of us, I think, to develop relationships when we go to Uganda with the people that are there. And we developed a relationship with Ralph and Michaela. And Ted and I were blessed to be able to go on a trip, Reformation pilgrimage tour in May. And we went to a church to talk to the pastor there and to see the church in Germany. And this guy was talking, and I told him, I said, oh, we met some people from Germany when we were there in October and April. And I said, one was Siegfried, and then the couple was Ralph and Michaela. And he says, Ralph's my brother. So this is Ralph's brother, Reiner, from Germany, that we met in May. So it's, we always say it's a small world. It is. I mean, it's a huge world, but getting to meet people and then having that connection with somebody that we've met in Africa, who is also from Germany, but then when we're in Germany, we're meeting others. So that was pretty neat for us to be able to meet him. And then also while we were there, and I don't have pictures for this, which we do have pictures. Franny is the one. Well, she's the white one there. Her and I, and Jen helped also when she could, worked with the children. And in the first photo, we taught the story of feeding of the 5,000. So we took goldfish from here to have that as a representation of the fish. And then we bought some bread. So we had bread and goldfish to feed the kids. And then they acted it out. We had taken costumes from here that we're going to leave there, and so they can use, churches can use them if they're telling stories to the kids. And, oh, this was our organizing, was that us organizing the friendship bags. We also take friendship bags to hand out to the Jajas and children when we do home visits. So, and the next slide, these are some more slides of Casa Rosa, the church building. The Sunday that we went, it was pouring rain. It was, you had to make sure you were sitting under a tent so you didn't get wet, and then they had to keep getting the water off from the tents. And Deb preached that Sunday, and I think in April when we go, we're going back when they dedicate that building. So we'll get to be a part of that. And our church put the roof on, right? We paid for the roof. So, and Leslie, I just want to tell you that you were a blessing to our group when we went, and we really enjoyed meeting you and getting to know you. And it's awesome to.
Cindy kind of stole my thunder with you, Leslie, because I wanted to comment, I didn't know you at all before we left, and it was just such a blessing to be able to get to know you and to witness your heart of service. That was just really amazing, and I hope that God will put it on your heart to come back again with us someday. In April. I would just really like to thank all of you for inviting us to be here today. This is my first time being out here at Sears, and it is just evident that God is in this place. So I just feel very blessed and humbled to be here today with you. I appreciate that. It isn't always evident to me the exact reason on my why I'm supposed to go to Uganda. I've been 5 times now. But the message to go is always very clear and very strong for me. And I love situations that are just so extreme or so clear that the only answer is that it was God. And this is how I feel about my service in Uganda, because it makes no sense, none, for a smaller than average white girl from Michigan to leave all the comforts of home to fly 24 hours or more when Delta decides not to do what they're supposed to do, and to go and be in very uncomfortable situations. But it's the going and being uncomfortable with God, and that's when the blessings come. So Uganda was and is never my idea. It is always the Holy Spirit. And this, next slide, please. Well, okay, sorry, I'll back up. This is one of the things that we have done the past couple of trips that we've been there. I don't know who coined the phrase buckets of love, but they truly are buckets of love. And for about $50 each, we fill it with rice and salt and beans and maize and oil, sugar, and chickens. And then they are presented to members of, whichever village we're in, the church members who can really use this. And it feeds a family for weeks and weeks. I mean, it's really fun. And that was, Pastor Bill was enjoying his time with the chickens. So next slide, please. This 2024 trip was unique for me because I wasn't supposed to go. I had said no multiple times. There was a family event that I was going to have to miss to go on this trip, but the Holy Spirit intervened in a really powerful way, and surprise, surprise, I went on the trip. And it was evident to me there was at least one thing that I was supposed to accomplish on this trip, and that was to be with this little boy, Alex, who shares the name of my middle son. And I had met him on the 2022 trip and played with him at Matungo School. We had done this soccer camp and just had a blast with the kids. And he really stood out not only because he's a phenomenal soccer player, and he certainly hasn't been playing, it's natural because he hasn't been playing at the local soccer club. But then he's also a leader amongst his peers. And some kids, teachers know this. Some kids just stand out and you can just see their potential. And that was Alex for me. And then we went back in 2023 and we weren't going to do soccer on the scale we did in 2022, but we still had, things we wanted to do with the kids, and Delta lost our bags. So, and one of them that got lost had all of the soccer equipment in it. And we went back to Matungo, and I know a lot of visitors go to this school just based on its location and the ease to get to it from Tim and Colleen's. So they see white people. I mean, it's not like, there's visitors going through that school quite frequently. But Alex remembered me, and he walked up to me and he said, "I want to play football with you." And it just literally tore my heart out of my chest because Delta had the bin with the soccer balls in it. And I had inquired about him. I asked if he was sponsored, and the answer was no. He didn't need sponsorship. The family was doing fine. So, fast forward to 2024, this trip I'm not supposed to go on. And I wanted to take him his own soccer gear. I was just like, if I have to carry it on myself, I will. Delta's not losing stuff for this kid this time. And I was trying to find out if he was still at Matungo School or if he had advanced up to the next school. And it took quite a long time to get that answer, but it took a long time because he had left school and because there were no school fees. And so now there was a need to be sponsored. And I think this was about 2 weeks before our trip. I was like, easy day, I'll sponsor him. What do you need? Here's my information. Get this kid back to school. He has so much potential. He cannot fall through the cracks. And so when we were at the school on the trip, Colleen told me the story behind Alex leaving. And she said, "Jen, you saved him." His father had left the family, leaving no way for his mother to pay his school fees. And he was out on the streets selling some bottles of liquid for pennies. And Colleen said he wouldn't have lasted much longer on the streets. He would have been scooped up by a gang, and he never would have come back to school. So those words, "Jen, you saved him." And it's just like so completely humbling. And there's experiences like that over there that happen time and time again where we think we're going to bless people and we get blessed. I mean, just Leslie knows. And so next slide, please. We hosted this big children party promise for the kids that our group sponsors. And I had asked Alex if he goes to church because that's part of sponsorship, and he said that he wants to come to my church. So again, ripped the heart right out of my chest. And he also wasn't eating his cake. I'm like, "Why aren't you eating your cake? You don't like cake?" And he said, "No, I'm saving it for my mom." And so we found him another piece of cake that he would eat. And I was even able to meet his mom because she needed to come to the school to escort him home because someone would have stolen his brand new soccer ball from him between the school and home. And but just what a blessing to meet his mom and talk to her. And and he's just such a sweet little kid, as is Anita. This is another child that my husband and I sponsor. And just the tiniest little things, the joy in her face when opening this doll that I actually hadn't got for her. I mean, Cindy was giving me extra things to give to Anita because I didn't feel like I had enough for her. And it was this little doll not from the dollar store, but something not too far from it. And just the joy on her face to receive this little doll is it's just so neat to experience. Next slide, please. I could be here all day talking about Uganda and the kids that our family is blessed to sponsor. This is 3 of the 4 that we sponsor. And you can just see the joy in their faces. And sponsorship is absolutely saving lives. If you sponsor a child, not just in Uganda, but everywhere, you are saving a life. Another place that is saving lives is Hope Vocational School. Next slide, please. And I would actually like to rename it to Hope International Vocational School because this is such a collaboration between the United States, multiple churches in the United States, Germany, and Canada. And that just doesn't happen without God, that many people and countries coming together for one cause. Eagle Ridge purchased the land to expand the school in 2022, And this was the year that Leslie and Bridget and Ryan came with us. And we've funded other projects in 23 and 24. And you can see, like, these were some pretty dilapidated buildings. They were at the bottom of the hill, and the rain would come down the hill, and soil would fill the bottom, and they really looked pretty bad. And but Tim Stevenson always has a plan, and he never wastes any time on his construction projects. So even after 1 week, there was a change in knocking down part of the walls and making room for windows and doors. Next slide, please. And Tim's master plan sometimes seems improbable, like, you're going to do what? And I'm pretty sure that's what Ted and Ryan were thinking as to, because they were going to raise the roof on that lower building behind Ted and then, putting on a roof where they're at. I mean, there's no walls, there's no OSHA, there's and so, but you just have to have faith. And next slide. Well, sorry. Go back one. So you can see in 2022 what it looks like with no walls and no roof. And then in 2023, and then this is the upstairs of one of the buildings. And 2023, walls and a ceiling. And then in 2024, Pastor Bill is there teaching. So in just 3 short years, you've taken, Tim's able to coordinate what looks like absolute chaos into really a very, very nice place for teaching and meeting. Next slide, please. And so I was trying to remember where I stood when I was there in 2022 to try and get a good comparison, but this is that dilapidated building that Eagle Ridge purchased, and the plan was for it to become dormitories, and we're like, okay, really? And then so in just 2 short years, you can see how they did. They raised that roof and smoothed out the walls and just made it really a great place. Next slide, please. And again, standing like on the outside, from the east side, looking at what was in 2022 to the, mostly finished project in 2024. Next slide. And then standing from the west side, looking east. I actually think these dates are reversed. So on the right is 2022, and you can see the roof is being raised. And then on the left is 1 year later what that building looks like. Next slide. And then this is kind of the final view of the dormitory. And it's such a blessing to the students at this school to have this space. And you can even see all their little shoes sitting outside the door, so people are in there. Next slide. And that was the dedication that we made. Next slide, please. And then these are some of the things that are taught at this school is culinary, tailoring, leather shop where they make shoes and handbags, and hairdressing. So this is the leather shop and the tailoring. Next slide. And then these are just some of the beautiful students that are sponsored there. And next slide. And so much like childhood sponsorship, this opportunity for students to come and learn a skill is saving lives. And it's doing it one at a time. So Alex to me is one kid, but all these kids and young adults, they all have souls that are worth saving. And it's just, again, such an amazing, humbling experience, and no explanation except God, how he weaves us together through his love. Thank you.
So how can you unite with us? That's what we'd like to say. We'd like you to unite with us, to be the hands and feet of Jesus. You could support a child through the Child of Promise, and I see that Anastasis is doing that this year. They're taking all their profits and sending that to Children of Promise. And you had someone from Children of Promise come here and speak, actually. So you're aware of what Children of Promise does. And they can be contacted through the Children of Promise office in Anderson, Indiana. But you could also sponsor a student at the vocational school. One of the things I forgot to mention about Naomi is that She had to drop out of school during COVID. So she lost the whole country was shut down for 2 years. We were shut down for a few months, but they were shut down for 2 years. And by that time, she had aged out of elementary school. So vocational training was really the only viable option for her. And so Hope Vocational is providing an education for some of these kids that did age out during the COVID pandemic. So it would cost about $600 a year, and it provides uniforms, national testing, and materials at Matungo or the other vocational school. These are for non-boarding students. These are kids that commute every day to school. But $600 a year, and if you divide, that's $50 a month. So just to divide that out. The next slide will show you that another thing you could join us on is, or unite with us, go with us. April 28th through May 6th is our next trip, May 6th or 7th, depending on flights. If you want to join us, the non-refundable deposit is due October 1st, which is not that far away. But if God is talking to your heart, take a step forward and see what God can accomplish through you. I wanted to mention that Lori and Pam, is Pam still, yeah, Pam's still here, Jeff, and let's see, Nolan, what's his first name? Nolan is his first name, right? Nolan Van Orden, that's right. Went with us before, and then Bridget went with us before, and some of those people went to Busiro, and they worked on the clinic there at Busiro, and that is a clinic today that is one of the 5 clinics in Uganda that are owned by the Church of God, East Africa, Uganda. And so we want to appreciate those folks that went on that trip as well. Also, Pam had been earlier than that. She went in 17 years, well, more than like 20 years ago now. She went with another group. So this church has a good history of their uniting with Uganda in many things. Also, in your worship folder, you will have seen a brochure from the nonprofit called United for Uganda. It looks like this. Tim and Colleen have retired from Global Strategies of Anderson, Indiana, but that didn't mean they stopped being missionaries. And so we put together this nonprofit that supports Tim and Colleen and the ministries of Uganda. We are working with the vocational school. We are working with many other entities within the country, working directly with Edrin, who is the national director. And so please be sure and take a brochure. And this helps you understand what is going on in Uganda. And even though Tim and Colleen aren't with Global Strategies anymore, they're still doing mission work. I mean, they are the Energizer Bunnies of Uganda. You go there and you think, I am exhausted, and Colleen is still up 4 more hours doing stuff. I mean, they are just so passionate about the ministry and passionate about leaders and passionate about the children. There are 600 churches, 200 schools, and we know of 2 vocational schools, and they're trying to open up another one up in Lyra City, and then the 5 clinics. And Uganda is not that big, really, to have that many. 600 churches is a lot of churches. And so Core Discipleship is busy trying to get all these pastors trained and really founded in the Church of God theology so that they are truly ministers of Church of God. Now, we're going to be in the lobby if you want to have any questions to ask us. We'll be happy to answer them. But I thought we should sing one more song. Okay? Is that all right with you? All right, I'll hop over to the piano. We're going to sing Holy Forever.